I'm Melinda McNaughton, as she said. I'm a soil advocate for Kiss the Ground. And I'm also a nutritionist. And so I'm very interested in how soil affects our nutrition and how it affects our world. And I think I became interested, the reason why I'm doing this is I became interested in this because I was a little bit sad and depressed, I think, as a lot of us are, about climate change and what's going to happen. And I thought that it might be kind of hard to just reduce our emissions and hope that everything's going to eventually be okay. So this movie that I saw was inspiring. It inspired me, and it gave a little bit of hope. And I think that's the reason I kind of glommed onto it. And I just am so excited to spread the word that there's something we can actually do to help reverse climate change if we all work together. I also wanted to introduce Toni Baker and Michael Stangle and Cameron Hodgkins. And those are also students of, well, actually graduates of Kiss the Ground coursework. And they also have expertise in soil and soil health. Michael is a regenerative lawn expert. Michael, did you want to say anything about where you're from and what your expertise is?
Sure. I'm up here in the Niagara region, St. Catharines, which is just on Lake Ontario here in Canada. And I got into lawn care, chemical lawn care, back in 1981 at the age of 16. In 2014, I actually went into a regenerative mode. I didn't call it regenerative back then, but I did go that way just to get off the chemicals because I saw it on myself and what it was doing to the environment. Other than that, I'll be hopefully talking with you at the end too, because once I start, I can't stop talking. Sorry. Is that good enough?
That's great. Thank you. And Cameron, did you want to say a little bit about yourself as well?
I guess I'm from Manitoba, Canada here, just kind of right in the middle of Canada. We got a mixed livestock farm, and we've been kind of managing regeneratively for the last 15 years, just like Michael. It's not what we called it when we started, but just trying to work with the ecosystem a little bit, and it's great to see some of the improvements that's going on our farm.
Thank you so much, and thanks for being here. And Toni, what would you like to say about what you're working on and where you're from?
Yeah, so I'm here in the San Francisco East Bay, and I am a suburban gardener, I guess you could say. I am actually in the middle of some new coursework that Kiss the Ground has just released, and it is for regenerative gardening. So I am learning a lot right now about how to transition my space from an organic garden to a regenerative garden on a small scale, and look forward, once I complete that work, to helping other small scale gardeners be able to do the same thing.
Great, thank you so much. And I think that we just have like a wealth of information here to dive into with everybody that has their own little areas of expertise. And so if you have any questions for us, let us know as we go through here. So this is the movie Kiss the Ground. In case you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix for free. And it is free to nonprofits now if you want to do screenings also in your own towns or at any events. Oops, trying to move through here. Can you guys see my screen?
We can see it. Yeah, and there's your title. Okay.
I'm trying to see. Oh, I see the little toolbar is not moving away here. Okay, here we go. Soil as a solution to climate change. So first, I wanted to just acknowledge that the information I'm going to present is a lot of scientific information that we have been learning in the last several decades. And however, the people that have known about it for thousands of years are the indigenous people to the lands here. And they knew how to keep balance with the land and how to steward the land in harmony with nature. They have knowledge from 15,000 years of care with the land. And because they're elder scientists, experimented and passed on this knowledge throughout generations. Our own coastal area is the Ohlone Ramaytush tribes, and there are many others with the different names in from the different areas of the Bay Area and San Mateo County. So I just wanted to acknowledge that they have amazing knowledge that we are just actually tapping into, and a lot of land, a lot of farms and a lot of different areas of restoration are actually working with tribes to restore their land. So first, just acknowledging the problem is we have a legacy load of CO2 and other greenhouse gases stuck in our atmosphere. And so that is from our fossil fuel and also the release of CO2 from soil, believe it or not. The soil is a carbon sink, and it is the second largest sink next to the ocean. So our solution is, oops, sorry, I can go back here. A potential solution for reducing the greenhouse gases would be sequestering it into the soil. So here's a picture of our greenhouse effect. The gases are trapped, as we all know, and they heat up. They're heating up with the sun. So can reducing emissions and clean energy reduce the legacy load is the question that I like to ask people to just kind of think about it. Can it reduce that load of stuff that's already up there? And the answer is no, but we do need to reduce our emissions and use clean energy so that we don't keep putting gases up there, right? So a solution to getting those gases out of the atmosphere is drawdown. And there's been a book called Drawdown written and published, and they have a website, and it's based on this idea that we've known for many years, that plants sequester CO2 and they bring it into the soil, and they store it there for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so if we change the way we manage the soil around the world, we can draw CO2 down, and we can all do this at home too, and we can all do it together. So if we go back about 10,000 years to about here, we can see that there was a lot of changes over 400,000 years up and down of CO2 emissions. But 10,000 years ago, when agriculture started, we started releasing a little bit more and more. And by the time we got to 1950, past the Industrial Revolution, we were at 300 parts per million. That could have been taken as a natural spike over time, but then we shot up to here at 415 parts per million. So it seemed quite obvious that fossil fuel was involved, the release of carbon dioxide from that. And also human generation of CO2 is released from the soil as well, which is something we didn't quite understand. A recent report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that climate and land use finds that we cannot avoid the worst impacts of climate change without transformation of our agricultural and natural resource sectors. It reported that it identified soil carbon sequestration as having the greatest potential for reducing emissions at the lowest cost. As the largest agricultural state in the country, California, and should lead the world in these efforts, is what it said. So why transform agriculture and land use? Most farming is actually, and has been for 10,000 years, destroying the soil and its building process. And most ranching is causing the same problem. The US loses about 1.7 billion tons of topsoil annually. So to put that in perspective, that's about 521 Dallas Cowboys stadiums full of topsoil per year. It's just huge. 75% of land is degraded. And in fact, some of these regions here that look like desert were actually discovered, in fact, Saudi Arabia recently, that showed evidence of previous agriculture and growth of previous forests and plants. So we are disconnected from the soil. It is sick and broken. And Ray Archuleta from the movie Kiss the Ground says we didn't really know how the soil worked. I'd argue that maybe the Native Americans knew a little bit more or a lot more than we did, but we are kind of just learning how it works now and what its capacity is. We have such a huge capacity to sequester CO2, greenhouse gases. So there's lots of reasons to rebuild the soil, and some of them are that it is the source of 95% of food produced. It is the reason we have clean water sources, because it filters water through the soil. It's the most biodiverse ecosystem on the planet with all the life that it can contain. And here's just basically what happens. It's a net carbon gain when you have plants on the ground, pulling CO2 down into the ground and storing it in the soil. So this is what it looks like when it's all happy, sequestering carbon. And this is when the soil is dead and it's losing carbon, it's dried out, the life is dying in it and decomposing. And this is what it looks like when it's releasing CO2. So you've probably all seen this around in rural areas in the Central Valley. It lays just bare for a big part of the year, and that during that part of the year it releases a lot of CO2. So plants and trees actually pull CO2 straight out of the air, out of thin air, and they build themselves from it. And then they transfer it as liquid. They convert it in photosynthesis to liquid carbon sugars in exchange for minerals and water that mycorrhizal fungi and microbes in the soil convert for it and grab for it. So break it down. And then it also creates a gluey substance, the mycorrhizal fungi does, that gets this, the soil sticks together and it becomes aggregated, and it's really healthy and it can absorb lots of water that way. So here's like a magnified picture of mycorrhizal fungi. Here's a picture of what they look like visually. Here's a diagram of a drawing, and then here's what it looks like in the soil. They're very kind of just small, tiny little white roots. You've probably all seen them maybe as you've dug up things, potentially. And then there's information that they transfer carbon in between plants and nutrients and information. So they're connecting plants together, not only connected to one plant, but they're connecting plants together. And the microbes in the soil play a huge part of that as well, providing nutrients for the plants. So we used to think plants used to suck up nutrients from the soil. I mean, they do in a way, but they get those nutrients from the mycorrhizal fungi and the microbes. So soil must be healthy in order for this to all happen. It's got to be alive with all kinds of microbes and mycorrhizal fungi and insects, and it's got to contain some organic dead matter. In order for it to be healthy, it's got to hold water like a sponge, and it's got to be covered with plants. So within the soil, you have this food web of all these different organisms, nematodes, insects, microbes, and mycorrhizal fungi. They all work together in this nutrient cycle. 1 teaspoon of healthy soil can hold more organisms than there are people on Earth. So that's how how healthy you got to have our soil and how alive. So this is what carbon-rich soil looks like. It's aggregated, it's stuck together because the mycorrhizal fungi have secreted glues in there that hold it together and store the carbon. And then on the other side here, on the left side, you can see this is dead soil. This is soil that doesn't have a lot of life, no microbes, no mycorrhizal fungi, and it falls apart. And it's also lighter in color. One holds water like a sponge and the other repels it, and that creates drought and erosion. I'm going to show you a video of a slake test. Before I do, I just wanted to ask if there were any questions up till now. Does this make any sense? Any questions? Any comments?
And you can unmute yourself and ask a question or a comment if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Well, the slake test is just going to show an example. It's a quick video of Ray Archuleta from the movie of what it looks like when you test soil in water that's really healthy and soil that's not super healthy that's been tilled. And you can see which one holds together better. It's pretty dramatic. So I might have to go through a commercial real quick on here. We'll see if there's a quick ad.
I'm
in the
Angle, I'm
front.
the head chef
Sorry
of Butcher
about
Box, and I'm also a Butcher Box
that.
customer.
Sorry about that. Passing that up.
That's because this is some of the best meat I've ever tasted.
Sorry about the ad.
I have a question to ask you. Is your soil healthy, functioning, and stable? One of the best visual diagnostic tools that I know of is the Soil Stability Test. Here are two soils, exactly the same soil type. This soil has been tilled for 30 years. This soil has not been tilled for 40 years. It is covered with diverse plants year-round. Watch what happens when we drop the soil in the water. Notice how the conventional till soil is falling apart. The biotic glues in the organic matter are burned up by tillage. The soil pores have collapsed. Notice the no-till soil. The pore spaces are still intact. Do this test for yourself. I guarantee if you dig a little, you'll learn a lot.
Okay, so I wanted to just let you know that Toni and I went to a farm and we did this very experiment. And Toni, did you want to talk about any, like what you thought about the results?
Sure. So, so Melinda and I were at a completely organic farm, and they had one section that they had been tilling, like their entire farm had been tilled originally. So I grabbed a clod of soil from that section. And then they had another section where they had recently started doing regenerative practices. So they weren't tilling that soil. And just in case nobody knows, like when farmers are tilling the soil, they're breaking it up, right? Like they have these big round blades that go through the soil, and they're breaking up all of those clumps, and it's making it a lot easier to plant in. It's making nice rows. It's what we all see when we drive on the highway and we see the beautiful farms off in the distance. And that's what we're used to seeing for farms. But we know, like Melinda was just saying, when that soil is tilled, it's releasing all this carbon into the atmosphere. And the plants aren't there when you have a tilled field to suck the carbon back down. So anyway, I got a clod from their regenerative side and a clod from their tilled side. Same type of thing, 2 big containers, glass containers of water with a little net inside to hold the clods. And immediately upon putting them in, the tilled clod started just falling apart, and the water was, very, very like milky with dirt. The other clod, nothing. I mean, a couple little tiny pieces sort of fell to the bottom, but the water was clear, and it stayed that way for a long time. And even though Melinda and I had gone through the training with Kiss the Ground and had watched people do this, we were both amazed. I mean, yeah. after I don't know, 5 or 7 minutes, I was like, okay, what happens if we shake them really hard? And so we did that, and we got a little bit more water coming down from the regenerative clod, a little bit more soil, I'm sorry, coming through the water from the regenerative clod, but that water stayed clear. It was holding so much more water. It was really incredible.
Yeah, it was quite dramatic. It was, I mean, your kids were there. We were like, whoa, we couldn't believe it, because both of the soil clods looked pretty much the same. In fact, we thought that the clod that had been tilled was so hard that there was no way that it was gonna fall apart like that. So yeah, it was pretty crazy. Thank you.
Very surprising.
Yeah. Okay, the next one is
Melinda, there's a question in the chat asking,
sure.
Yeah, Lizelle would like to know if you could go back to the food web under the soil when you get a chance. And
okay.
And if Lizelle has if you have any more question, you can, was there anything in particular you wanted to look at in the food web?
On the food web right here?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, I was just, no, I was just curious. I just wanted to see what it all included. So nematodes. Okay.
Yeah. No problem.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It goes
It's really simple. I was just curious.
Yeah. No, it goes all the way up to, it's pretty cool. It goes all the way up to the mammals, and then we can
Mhm.
see how we eat some of those too. And yeah. So,
Nice.
okay,
Thank
cool.
you. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Okay, and the next one is the bread and soil demo that's done by Finian Makepeace. He's one of the producers of the movie, and it goes kind of fast. So just wanted to warn you. I think he was trying to get it all in 1 minute. So here it is.
This is bread and flour demonstration showing how tilled, degraded, deaggregated soil functions underwater and how bread, representing our healthy aggregated soil, operate. We're going to show how rainfall impacts both. Here we go. Rainfall onto our degraded soil. Watch as it runs off, taking with it the precious topsoil and not infiltrating into the soil. Move this over to our healthy soil. It immediately absorbs. Now, as this absorbs, it will start to reach the bottom and come out as healthy, crystal clean water that represents our springs. This is absorbing and retaining and holding all that moisture for the plants. And we go back over to our dead soil, wipe off this top layer, and it's dry, bone dry. You can show this to anyone and demonstrate the difference between dead, degraded soil and healthy soil. We need to build back the healthy soil.
All right. Does anybody have questions about that? Does that make sense? All right. I'm trying to get back to my presentation mode here. Oop, going back. All right. Yeah. So I always think that's a really good visual. That last one of just showing the difference between healthy soil and soil that's not healthy. And you might want to be thinking just about your own backyards about where this applies. You can see it in your neighbor's soil as you're walking down the street. You can see healthy soil and unhealthy soil. And after I took the coursework and even watched the movie, I started really noticing healthy soil creates healthy water cycles. It prevents runoff, flooding, and desertification. That's just the making of deserts, and topsoil loss. Here's an example of healthy soil, regenerative soil, that has a lot of mycorrhizal fungi and life in the soil compared to heavily tilled soil, heavy use probably with chemicals too. It's land in the same town just across the way from each other, maybe, I don't know, a mile or two away. This one you can see after they both had heavy rain on the same day, several inches. The one on the left, you can see there's runoff, water's running off, and you can see a little bit of erosion, and if there's evaporation occurring because there's nothing to suck it down, not much to suck it down into the soil. On the right, you don't even see any rain puddles or anything, because that's how fast healthy soil can just suck the water down. It's like within seconds. And there's also an amazing soil test for that we also did at the HEAL project called the soil infiltration test. You get to time how fast the water actually gets into the soil on healthy soil and unhealthy soil, and it's pretty interesting. This is a just an example, another example of the soil is not functioning at capacity. It's not optimal. It's not pulling down water from a heavy rain. It's creating flooding, and you're losing topsoil there, right, too, because it's running off of the land. So I just wanted, with this talking about water and water cycles, this is could be a water cycle in your own yard. It's called the small water cycle. And these small water cycles are everywhere. They're infinite. It's but it accounts for like 40% of rain and regional evaporation and condensation. And so we have to keep in mind that even the soil on our own land is sucking down water into our water tables. It's not just the ones that are falling in the reservoir. So that's what the small water cycle is. The big water cycle is what we mostly think of, the water evaporating off of the ocean and then pouring down onto the land and running off and soaking in. But we also have very small ones that are important too, everywhere. So how is the soil destroyed? And this is, we talked about some of it already, but overgrazing is one of them that kills off plants and root networks. Undergrazing also does too, because then the animal part is missing from the land. You're missing the manure and animal inputs to the land, even footprints, and just moving the soil around and the plants around on the surface a little bit. And that's what builds up the soil microbes. So all of that contact with the soil and the plants. Tilling breaks up the network of fungi, a mycorrhizal fungi in the soil, and kills off the fungi and the microbes slowly. Not putting a cover on the soil to protect it. It just dries out. That's just a huge, massive area for evaporation to occur, and that's a huge loss of water. Overuse of chemicals can kill soil life and dry it out as well. We lose 4 tons of topsoil per acre per year. I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard about our topsoil problem losses, but we can regenerate the soil, and that is what regenerative agriculture is all about. It's regenerating the soil and bringing it back to life, and bringing it to a point where it can balance out our atmosphere again. So there are 6 principles of regenerative agriculture. One is least disturbance, and that is not disturbing the soil with chemicals or tilling. Having a living root in the soil, which is also like soil armor, protecting it. Soil armor. Animal integration is having a variety of species on the soil, putting manure into the soil. And if you don't have the animals there, then maybe you're putting manure into the soil, like in your garden. And then increasing the biodiversity of the plants increases the biodiversity of the insects and the life in the soil and the microbes in the soil, and also the animals and ecosystems all around. So you're also bringing back ecosystems when you increase diversity and bring in native plants. Context is like you're not going to plant bananas in Minnesota kind of thing. So just go through the pictures. The tilling would be something to transition to no-till. And they have machines on the farm called crimper rollers that actually push down and break down the weeds and plant in seeds and plants. Chemicals, you'd want to reduce chemicals. We'd want to reduce the chemicals or get rid of chemicals on the land altogether, which end up killing off a lot of the life in the soil. How to grow plants without chemicals. Apparently, and it seems to be from the research that they've collected, that you need less or none when the soil is full of healthy microbes and diversity and nutrients, because these qualities of super healthy soil fight off pests and disease. So the real goal is to just support all that natural life that can be super abundant in there. And when you do, it provides abundance in your soil and your plants. The other one is bare soil. You would want to transition that to cover crops. And cover crops can be something that the farmers could harvest their seeds for sale, or even harvest the plant for sale. So it would be adding another product they could make money off of. And then annuals, not planting as many annuals and transitioning in perennials, plants that are there more permanently. So annuals are like they have to be replanted every year. Perennials and natives oftentimes reseed themselves or are there for several years. And then the other part is the cow. We know that overgrazing and confined feedlots cause a lot of problems with methane production and degrading of the soil. So it would be transitioning the cows away from the confined feedlots where they collect a lot of methane already in big giant mounds, and doing planned grazing, or and the way they do this, it's called rotational grazing. So instead of continuous grazing where all of the pasture can get a little bit overgrazed and the soil can become unhealthy, they do what's called managed rotational grazing, where they break up the pasture into sections, start the animals in one section and move them into different paddocks. And by the time they get to the end here, this whole area has started to grow back, and they take them out before it's overgrazed, and then they start again. And that actually creates a really healthy cycle, nutrient cycle for the soil on the ranch land. And then adding compost is huge. So a lot of farmers are healing their land just with compost alone, but the compost has to be alive, really full of life. So here's some studies where they found that a single one-time application of compost doubled forage production, which is the food that the animals eat, increasing it by 40 to 70%. And soil carbon sequestration increased 2.4 tons per acre over a 3-year period on both coastal wet and Sierra foothill dry and Mediterranean grassland systems. Compost decomposition provides a slow release of fertilizer to the soils, leading to increase in carbon sequestration and plant production. So the net ecosystem carbon storage increased by 25 to 70%, which is huge. And that just like kind of shows you, wow, you may only need compost to help with your garden. So add lots of living and dead matter to the soil. Compost is so important. And farmers are using it to heal their soil. And there was a recent study where they were using it to heal desert soil and add life into soil that was degraded and converted it back into healthy soil. Simply put, compost increases photosynthesis and therefore the ability for plants to sequester carbon and build back soil structure. So I'm going to skip the nutrition and taste section because
Melinda, there's a question in the chat
sure,
asking about on your visit to the farm, did the farmers comment at all on how the till versus the regenerative side, if it changed the output of the crops?
Oh yeah, so no, I didn't have a chance to talk to the farmer about it yet because I wanted to show her the videos. Thank you for that question. And I'm so frustrated I can't get the videos to upload onto the website and the area where I needed to show it to her. But I do plan on showing her those videos when I get that all taken care of. And yeah, it'll be interesting to hear her comments about it and see what she thinks. She does use regenerative practices on the land. She uses both. So I think she'd be excited to know what was happening.
And there's another question about how we can rotate what's in our home garden bed to keep it healthy and diverse. Is there a resource to find what plants go together to partner with for bug control, etc.? Oh
yeah. So I actually look up a lot of stuff online to see which plants are complementary to each other and which plants help resist certain pests. But I would say, yeah, I'm gonna have to go to Toni on the crop rotation. Do you know anything about rotating plants in the garden? Because have you been learning about that?
Yeah. And that's actually something I've done for a while.
Oh, cool. Okay.
It's really important. So ideally, if your space is large enough, ideally you have more than one garden bed. But if you don't, and you're just working with one space, then even within that garden bed, it's important to not plant your tomatoes in the same spot you did last year, like plant them in a different corner or a different side of the bed. And that will help a lot. And the reasoning for that is that different plants require different levels of the nutrients that are present in the soil. So we do have to amend our garden bed soil, every season that we plant. Generally, we're doing that amending with compost and sometimes various other things, depending on what stage we're at of building our soil up to be this super healthy soil we're looking at on the screen right now. But the plants are always sucking nutrients out of the soil. So we do want to rotate them as much as possible. It doesn't necessarily matter too much how you rotate them, unless you're getting into adding in cover crops on off-season times when you don't have anything in your bed, and that's kind of an advanced subject I can get into if anyone is interested, but for now I'll leave it. And in terms of preventing bugs, that again leads to healthy soil. And that is something I am still working on. I'm convinced that that I've developed a bug haven here at my house because all of my neighbors spray pesticides and we do not, and they come to my house to live. So sadly. But we are working on it. This season so far has been a lot better, although we have seen new types of pests that we haven't in the past. So it's a process. The bugs is a process, but I do know that the healthier the soil is, the stronger the plants will be, the less that they will be susceptible to damage from those bugs. And then regarding the question about which plants and vegetables to plant together, I do the same thing as Melinda. Like, I look it up. One place to sort of start is that things that taste really good together often can do well being planted in the same bed. It's not always true, but if you want to work from an intuitive type place, that's a good place to start. But I use Google a lot to find that out. Mm-hmm.
You mean, so like the pizza garden would all be like an example.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you.
And there's some additional question. How do you plant seeds if you don't till the soil? We use compost in our raised beds to grow veggies and herbs and kind of rotate.
Yeah, how do you plant seeds if you don't move the soil, right? I think, so on a larger scale, what they're doing is using a crimper, a crimper roller that has these kind of spikes that push down into the soil, and then the seeds fall in. And same kind of method if they're planting a small plant in there. So I think the least disturbance, and in fact, I wanted to mention that when you pull plants, you may not want to pull the entire plant out. You might want to take a scissors and pull it a little bit, clip a little bit, so a lot of those roots stay in the soil, because that helps the mycorrhizal fungi stay in the soil and keep it healthy. And that's something I haven't been doing, that I just learned about. But as far as planting seeds, it might be more like poking a hole in your garden bed. Yeah.
And there's one last question that I see is, does composting create any methane?
Compost create methane? That's a good question. I know. So anytime you're composting and the soil is biodegrading, there's going to be some gases that come out of it. So, but the part that you're looking for is to add health and nutrients to the soil. You have to add the compost in order to draw and put the life back into the soil. So it is, even though it's going to release some gases, the net effect in the long run is that you're going to be drawing down more gas, because you're making the soil healthier and the plants healthier.
Melinda, I can speak to that a little bit too.
Oh, sure. Okay.
One of the cool things about composting is that the methane producing microbes are actually not active in the presence of oxygen. So when you're composting correctly and you have enough brown matter in your compost and you're getting in there and you're turning it every week, you're really not producing any methane at all. So it does require that that you don't have too much green matter, that you don't have just like a compost bin full of your kitchen scraps that doesn't get turned and gets kind of yucky. That can start to cause a problem. But as long as you're incorporating the brown matter, like, you know, dead leaves and dried grass without weeds and other things like that, you should be okay.
Wow, good. Okay.
And there is another question. Someone would like to know, this is for Toni, are you testing your soil to determine what amendments to use, and do you incorporate manure?
So for me in particular, I have never tested my soil, but this one might be a good one for Cameron, as well actually as any of the soil advocates. I'm just learning this stuff and realizing that I probably do need to test my soil before I add anything. But what do you guys think?
I guess I'm not soil testing too much here. I guess when we do soil tests, we're trying to use the Haney Test. The Haney Test is testing, you know, more. Michael, help me out here. It's testing the microbiology basically in the soil and saying what nutrients that biology can produce to feed the plants, basically, other than just a straight chemical test to say you need this much nitrogen, this much phosphorus.
That seems like a helpful test.
Well, with the what happens is that if you take a core sample of any soil from a lawn to a garden to your farm, you can actually understand it better if you're looking at a microscope, which we do here in house, and figure out the biomass ratio of the fungus to bacteria. And you can, as you guys may not know or know, if you have a bacteria dominated soil, it creates more nitrates, which force up more weeds for nature to progressively create more carbon. And as you increase your fungus, you're going to get more ammonium, incorporated into the soil. And that's where our plants, crops require. And that's where you'll find the weeds fall away. And as Cameron was saying, the Haney Test will look at that and give you an outcome based on what they see and what the potential your soil has. Now, it does a bit of chemistry, but they don't go looking at the chemistry and using that because the chemistry is only looking at less than 1% available at that moment. And what's available at any moment can change. I can go further than that, but I'll stop there.
Okay, yeah, no, that's really cool to know about that test. It's called the Haney Test?
Yes.
And is that something that's feasible to do for gardens, or is that more of an expensive test for farms and ranches or lawns?
I've never paid for it. Cameron, have you?
Well, I guess we've never paid for it either because we're in this General Mills project and they're paying for it.
Yeah.
But I think it's like
okay.
I think it's like $100 a test. But what people are saying is, for farmers, just don't take multiple samples over your field, mix it in a bag, and then send those samples away so you get a representative sample of the entire field. You're not taking 10 different samples of this one field. You're mixing it up and trying to get your best bang for your buck. But I guess it depends on what you want to spend on your garden. $100 sounds like a lot of money, but $100, I've spent $100 on a lot worse things.
Okay.
I will say for the home gardener, they do have soil tests available online and at garden stores. There's a very popular one. It's called Rapid Test. Can't remember the name of the company that makes it right now. I have used that before. I personally find it a little difficult to use. It's hard for me to compare what you do is you put your soil in with some water, you shake it up real good. You have to let it sit for a certain number of hours. And then you take some of that water, put it in a container with a little tablet that they provide for you. And then you compare it to a color chart. I have a really hard time comparing the colors personally. So I have tested my soil that way before. I was like, I think I know what I'm looking at. But I did actually just this afternoon buy myself a digital soil test reader. So again, totally for home gardeners, this is not really going to work on a large scale so much. So I'm excited to use that. And someone had asked also if I use manure in my garden, and I do. So this season in particular, I supplemented a lot with worm castings. And I also have chickens. So our, chicken manure gets incorporated into our beds as well, as long as I have enough time when they're not going to be planted right away. Otherwise, I have a compost pile that is basically chicken manure and straw from their coop and various other things I'll throw in there. No food. I do that in the compost bin, but just to let it sit. You don't want to use your manure too hot. It can kill your plants.
Yeah, good tips there. All right, so I'm going to move on a little bit, and then I'm going to wrap this up. I probably won't do all of the stuff I have here, but I think I covered the bulk of it. If we transitioned only 10 to 20% of agriculture around the world to regenerative, it would sequester enough CO2 from our emissions. This is like in 1 year, they're saying, to begin to reverse climate change. So imagine if we did that every year. So farmers are hurting, and we kind of know about what they're going through with they're losing money every year. The subsidies aren't helping much. The land is losing its productivity capacity and biodiversity. Input costs for them are going up, and most of the soil on cultivated land has lost about 50 to 70% of its carbon stock because a lot of it's up in the air now, right? The regenerative model can help them increase their profits. There's a lot of research and data now that's been collected because they've been doing this for years, transitioning to regenerative, showing the differences in the soil and the amount, like for example, this one is the biomass per acre of a conventional or a degraded land, not necessarily conventional, 981 pounds of living soil biomass per acre compared to a regenerative, rotationally grazed ranch, 12,500 pounds of biomass. That's what's living in the soil per acre. And then as far as production of forage goes, what the animals are eating on a ranch that is, let's see, what do we say? Just generally, it's not regenerative, conventionally ranched, where they're just out there on the whole field mowing it down, possibly overgrazing. They get about 500 pounds of forage. On a regenerative ranch. There's such a huge contrast, 80,000 pounds of forage per acre. That means they can add more animals per acre when they're getting that much forage on the land. An example of a farmer talking about how they saved money. They saved over $200,000 by reducing input costs on seed, pesticides, herbs, and fungicides, and fertilizer, and labor. And that really reduced their costs. And they had also reduced glyphosate consumption by 80%. And they were glyphosate free by year 3. So there's a lot of interesting things that have been happening that they've been seeing, where they can make some money, make more money than they have been. They create more abundance with the health of the land. Regenerative agriculture is the least expensive and fastest way to sequester greenhouse gas while enhancing water sources, biodiversity, and preventing extinction of species. So we go to gardening and lawns, which is kind of what we were talking about. I just wanted to say what I've learned so far about gardening and lawns is that, and I guess all soil, the soil can be sick and polluted, and these are the basics to heal it and nourish it. So number 1 is feed the soil. Compost, it can be in the form of compost tea and adding manure as well. There's another thing that can be done, and that's inoculating with mycorrhizal fungi, but I would definitely research that first, and maybe Michael has some things to say about that, and even Cameron, if they've been using that on their land. And then after feeding the soil, cover the soil, keep it moist, and keep that water in the soil with plants or some kind of mulch. Do you guys have any comments about that?
Cameron?
We haven't really inoculated with mycorrhizal fungi or anything like that, but okay. just following those soil health principles is something that we try and strive for. And I guess the big thing for our monitoring is just physically dig in the soil, and they always talk about smelling it. And once you smell good soil, it kind of just sticks with you. And I mean, it's pretty subjective, that this test, but it's something you can do in live time, and you know what's going on. It's just the smell of the soil. When it's right, it smells wonderful.
Oh, good. That's really good to know. Yeah. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, I've used the mycorrhizal fungi and the obviously the compost, the teas and such. If you're going to do such as that, there's a little more to it than just inoculating it. I would aerate if you're looking at a home lawn, aerate and then apply the seed, then apply the mycorrhizal with the compost tea, and then water right after that, and you should get a good take. But then again, you're working through legacy issues in a lot of lawns, so you're going to work through some past applications of what a herbicide or an insecticide or a fertilizer. But the rhizophagy cycle, which is more science, if you just start something from seed, you'll actually build more carbon from planting a seed with the proper compost tea than anything else.
Very cool. That's good to know. Yeah. I'm going to move on here and see what else I have. This is just like the difference between when you look out there and you're driving around or walking around, you can see the unhealthy soil and how it could potentially be reimagined, right, to be regenerative and be healthy and sequestering a lot of CO2. So just kind of reviewing, how does healthy soil reverse climate change? It sequesters CO2, it absorbs and filters water, it prevents flooding and drought, it promotes biodiversity and plant health, Mother Nature likes to cover herself in plants, and plants cool the planet, which actually brings me to another experiment you can try with a temperature gun, which Toni and I did with her kids at the Heal Project. Is we took my temperature gun and pointed it at a couple of different things. And Toni, did you want to talk about that?
Oh, the kids had such a good time doing that.
Yeah.
We were all blown away, and it's one of those things that, you know, we had watched videos of people doing it and certainly heard about it, but when you are checking the temperature of an area where the ground is covered versus uncovered, it can be, I mean, I think we saw a difference of 40 degrees, and it wasn't even hot that day. It was like,
it was overcast.
It was overcast. It was maybe 68 or 70 degrees. Like, it was really something. It was a huge difference.
It was cool. It was so dramatic, like the kids were pointing it at a dirt clod, and it was like 95 or something degrees. And then they pointed it at the soil that was like had lots of plants around it, and it was like 70 degrees or something like that. And then the plant itself was in the 60s. So it was just such a significant, it was so telling. Yeah.
It really was.
Linda, there's a question on how do we reconcile deep leaf litter and mulch and watering with fire safety and drought restrictions?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, because they're saying you want to not have, okay, so I think the rules are you're not supposed to have any kind of mulch or wood chips around your house with like 5 feet away from your house, right? So I think the key is to make sure you don't have too deep of leaves or wood chips. Make them 5 feet away from your house. And then I guess you could put rocks down around your house. They do say to use succulents around your house. And then further out away from your house, this is especially if you're out on a lot of land. 5 feet away, you're not supposed to have trees too, I think. But further out away from your house, then you want to definitely keep that soil moist and healthy with plants. And I know that Michael has some good recommendation. I think you do about grass. I might be confusing you with somebody else. But anyway, covering the ground is always going to keep the water in it and keep it moist. So when the ground is dry, it's going to dry everything out. So the key for the fire deterrent landscaping is to still keep your soil moist. And an example of this that really strikes home is there's 2 or 3 areas of farmland that I know of where the fire has just completely gone. It was surrounding it, but it didn't actually get onto the farmland. And one of them was the biggest little farm in the movie, and then the other one was a farm out in Vacaville. But the fire doesn't tend to necessarily want to go on the land where the soil is super moist. I mean, I'm sure it can get into the trees and things like that, but it won't travel across the land if the land is moist. So that's what my learning about it has given me that information. Anybody else want to say?
Yeah, in terms of drought restrictions, because, all of us here in California, at least, are kind of facing that at this point for this summer. Watering as close to the ground as possible is really helpful, instead of an overhead water, which a lot of us tend to do because it's easier and maybe we don't want to bend down all the way and get underneath each plant. But you'll save a lot of water by watering as close to the ground as you can, and keeping everything covered. I know that we have to be careful right now about what we're using as our mulch, because we don't want that to be a fire hazard. But you can use compost as a mulch. You could potentially use it's a forest mix as a mulch, and that has it's more dirt-like than wood chip-like, so it wouldn't burn as easy, but it will really help to keep the soil underneath that mulch damp. And that's just going to help cut down your water usage a lot. So
yeah,
it helps a little bit.
Moist. Yeah. The other thing is, I did do some research on this too, is you want to probably plant some fire resistant plants, and there's lists of that on the internet. The other thing is the mulches. The difference between the mulches, the larger wood chips actually don't burn as quickly as the smaller ones. So to keep that in mind. Yeah, good questions.
We also have a question about, somebody says that they converted their lawn to drought resistant plants, but the landscaper laid down black cloth and bark mulch. How do they add manure, et cetera, to help soil, or is the soil doing just fine as is?
That's a good question. So I would generally tend to now, I've used the landscape cloth before, but now tend to stay away from it because I think it's oftentimes mostly plastic, and then you're eventually going to get microplastics in the soil. But if you already have it down, it is covering the soil, and so is the mulch. So it's keeping the moisture in there. My question would be whether, like you're asking, if you put compost or manure down, how effective that's going to be. I think there's pores in a lot of the types of cloth that it can get through, but it may not quite be as effective. So I guess my idea would be to put down compost and manure closer to the plants, maybe tear a little space in the cloth so that the plants can get that on top of the soil near them, and then to water it. What do you guys think?
I put an answer on there. I would just use a vermicompost extract and apply it to all your plants in the soil. That'll help speed up the breakdown in the soil, and at the same time increase your photosynthesis to send more exudates down to produce more carbon locking up in the soil where what the biology needs. That way you don't have to worry about it, and just keep putting your mulch on top.
Okay.
Michael, can you speak to the vermicompost extract a little bit for those of us who don't know what that is? How do we make that work as a home gardener?
Well, one, you get obviously the castings of a worm, or you create your own worm compost, and then you take some of that. I use approximately 2 pounds to an acre, and I wash it. I literally run water over it, melt it down into a tank, and then I apply it to my lawns, gardens, and flower beds. And I do that once a month. And basically what you're going to get is all the minerals, nutrients, the ciliates that are in there, also with the other protozoa, the bacteria. You're going to get fungus. You're going to get everything in there that you need. And also what we call auto-inducers is what they do for talking to each other. They send out chemical signals. So bacteria send out chemical signals, the protozoa and all them. But at the same time, the prey, I shouldn't say the prey, the predators will use those signals to find what they're going to eat. And that's the soil food web. And that's why I like using a vermicompost, or I use a Johnson Sioux composter also. And again, how you make it, like you were mentioning earlier with your scraps, your food scraps, you just get a bunch of, I use any type of worms, but there are specific worms for that, and start feeding them, and then start using what's coming out of them. And you only need a bit. You really don't need much. Like I say, I'm using 2 pounds an acre, and so that's 43,000 square feet for 2 pounds. 43,000 anyway.
When you say 2 pounds an acre, are you talking about, is that 2 pounds of solid worm castings that you rinse down?
Yes, that's
Okay.
it. And it might not be solid worm castings. It could be other debris.
Okay.
That's mixed in there. And then I put it through a screen.
Uh-huh.
I have a video on my channel that I show how to make all this. So I use a screen, and I wash it, and I put it into a big tank, a 300-gallon tank, and then I use that to go apply to a hectare, which is 109,000 square feet a day.
Wow,
Okay.
that's awesome. Would you be able to put a link to that in the chat so we can check it out?
Sure.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that too.
Try
Yeah, and a
figure it
link to your website as well, which we weren't able to get posted up in the description at registration, so that people could check it out. It'd be good.
out. And then I'll try and find it for us.
Okay.
But you can go on. I'll look for it.
And
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
in the chat, Susie was wondering about biochar, I think in reference to when you were talking about the different kinds of mulch for fire and drought resistant.
Oh, right. So I'm not as familiar with biochar. Are any of you guys?
Cameron? I'm not personally a fan of it. It really does work, but I wouldn't use it for my lawns. Other people are using it in the farm. And they're producing it themselves. I love my extracts. I just would use the worm or my compost extracts over everything.
Okay.
It's
keep it simple.
An inch of biochar is supposed to be like a football field of mycelium and all the stuff that's necessary for the, I mean, because it's so, I guess because it spreads out so much and it creates like places for everything to grow and go. So it's supposed to produce things that grow way faster and better. I don't know. I haven't used it, but I just wondered.
Yeah, I have. Thank you for bringing that up. I have heard a lot about it, but I just I don't know as much about how to use it, especially for, I would think though, like you're saying, for fire deterrent purposes as mulch, that might be a good one too, because it's already burned. It's not going to burn again, possibly, right?
And there's a movie called The Need to Grow that is phenomenal. I mean, the guy's actually growing pineapples in Montana in the winter, but he's not doing anything. He's doing everything right, and he's producing biochar as a result of this. And he's got enough electricity for 100 homes coming out of this little greenhouse thing. It's phenomenal. If you haven't seen this, you've got to see it. The Need to Grow.
The Need to Grow. Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I'm going to write it down and check it out.
The biochar is fascinating. An organic gardener used it, and his plants just went totally through the roof, almost literally, because it was so so productive, producing productiveness.
Wow, that's awesome.
So,
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Who's talking?
Teresa.
Oh, hi, Teresa.
Hi. Hi, I just wanted to comment on the fabric, the use of the landscape fabric. And I think you're right about having, the soil near the plants. And I'm not a fan of the fabric. I've sold it and used it for years. But I think what's important is that that fabric has got to be as wide as the drip line of any shrub, plant, tree that it's sort of surrounding. So you have to have that as wide as the widest part of the drip line of that plant in order for that plant to get the rain and the nutrients that it needs.
Okay, that's something good to consider. Yeah, thank you.
So,
I'm in Alberta.
Are you in Alberta?
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, there's just, I was just wanted to mention there's a question about are there any volunteer opportunities at regenerative farms in San Mateo County?
Oh, such a good question. Yes. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to go back to, I'm going to show you the farms. Okay. So Pie Ranch has volunteer opportunities there in Pescadero out here on the coast, which is considered San Mateo County. We were just on a tour, Toni and I, of this ranch, and they were just saying they need people to help volunteer, especially because they have some fire restoration, eco restoration work that's needed there. So that's a good one. The Heal Project also takes volunteers every Friday to help with, I think they pull crops to sell at the farmer's market on Saturday. And I'm not as familiar with volunteer work, possibly at Hidden Villa, but I'm not as familiar with whether they take volunteers at Market Guard grass-fed or Left Coast grass-fed. So those are possibilities to check into as well, and Fifth Crow Farms. These are all the farms that I know about that are either transitioning to regenerative or are mostly regenerative here on the coast. All right. And I will just go back real quick, and I want to show you the Regenerative Label that's coming out. This is a picture of it here on the left, Regenerative Organic Certified. There's another one called Demeter Certified Organic. They both are very good labels. They both support the soil and support small farmers. So those are the kinds of labels to look out for when you're buying food at the grocery store. Those are the ones that you'd want to support with your dollars. Let let's see, here's going back again. Oops, going backwards. Just to show you a before and after picture, because I think it's so fun. In case you didn't see the movie, this is from a part of the section of the movie where the Loess Plateau in China, it was 920,000 hectares that were restored to regenerative agriculture. And that is about the size of Denmark. And the actual Chinese government and the World Bank funded this because they saw that this area of land was such, I guess, a loss of money to them. Agriculture had degraded it over the years. You can see the terracing in the hills in the before picture here, and in the after picture, you can see how lush and beautiful it is after they restored it. Regenerative soil, huge part of the planet that's sucking in CO2 right now. This is another one. So Gabe Brown from the movie, he was a conventional farmer turned regenerative. He was pretty much hit rock bottom and realized he had changed the way he was doing things, or he was just not going to make any money, and his soil was just dead. It took him 3 years to regenerate his farm, but now he is a consultant, a soil consultant, and he's transitioning about 22 million acres in the US to regenerative. So these are like the hopeful things that are happening. The comparison of the land on the left was his neighbor's land, conventional. It only held about 40,000 gallons of water per acre, and his land held 140 gallons of waters per acre after he got it going regenerative. So it was just such a huge difference. Just having the biology in the soil created abundance for him. And now he saw profits too right away after about 3 years. And on the soils that he consults with other farmers now, he sees it transition. He sees a lot more quicker transition, like within a year for some people. So it's pretty.
Isn't that a small investment as far as time is concerned?
Yeah, if you look at
and it's amazing that the soil's able to do that in a year just with a little help from us.
Right. Yeah. Does Cameron, do you want to talk a little bit about your farm and your transition? Did you guys have to transition?
Well, I guess, yeah, I guess wasn't really a transition all of a sudden. We just actually took a holistic management course when I came back to the farm, and that kind of sent us down this regenerative path with some managed grazing stuff. And this managed grazing is really where it's taken off. And this is what, Gabe Brown's promoting with his company, Understanding Agriculture. And that 40,000 gallons they're basically talking about increasing organic matter in their soil. Every 1% increase in organic matter is 20 to 25,000 gallons of water, storing water in your soil. And I guess that's kind of where we are, and we can get, we're obviously up in Canada here, and we're in the heart of Canada. We usually get lots of snow, but I guess that's kind of where we've been striving for our farmers to graze cattle longer or livestock longer. And this year we were able to graze 10 months of the year. And
wow.
So, I mean, we did have to supplement with a little bit of energy and that sort of stuff, but it proves the fact. And now we're into a drought here, and we're destocking a little bit right now, but with planned grazing, it gives me a little bit of confidence. I can control when the cows are moving, but I can't control when it's going to rain. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Where are you from, Cameron?
Manitoba, like just
yep.
Couple hours east of Winnipeg, west of Winnipeg.
Hi, neighbor.
Hello.
Are you from Alberta?
Yeah, I'm from Alberta.
Okay. Well, and what's your name?
Teresa.
Teresa. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Thanks for joining us from so far away.
Yeah.
Could I say one more thing, Linda? I guess it's easy to get, just like you said earlier, overwhelmed on everything that's going on and how we need to change so much. But instead of just trying to be perfect, let's just be better than yesterday. Just improve a little bit. Like if we can just strive to do a little bit or promote it to somebody else or do something in your own backyard. That's just because sometimes it's easy to get overwhelmed with we need to change the world type thing. But
Amen.
Yeah. That's great. I love that. Great piece of advice. Just do little by little, and then you're making a difference in the big screen, scope of the picture. Yeah. Very cool.
And I think if farmers and ranchers like Cameron can, you know, men who are on the land and earning their livings, that's who can relate to the same types of people who've been doing things one way for generations, and maybe they can start to consider a new way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think the regenerative ag thing's really taken hold, and people are looking at it to make some changes, and it's going to be interesting in the next few years, I think, especially with, you know, some of the changes that both of our governments are implementing here in the next few years. It's exciting, and it's maybe they're going down the wrong path, but it's being discussed. That's all I've got to say on it, right? Like it's getting the attention it needs, I think, my opinion.
Oh my gosh, Canada was on top of it before the US. You guys were awesome. Can you tell us about what's going on with Canada in case some of us don't know?
Well, I haven't been following as much as I should, but maybe someone else can. But it just seems like they're really talking about, you know, some of this carbon stuff now, and there's a lot of variables there, but it's just come to the forefront in Canada. I think with some of the stuff too in the States, you guys have probably pushed us in this last little bit. Am I right, Michael? Like, just
Yeah. It's more like Gabe Brown and the crew there that really pushed it globally. Australia was well ahead of the pack too, with the Balam down there, Christine Jones, all of the professors and people down there. So I think it's as a whole, it's generating a lot of energy, and it's moving forward positively.
No, that's so good to hear. I'm glad you guys are saying that. That makes me feel hopeful. Yeah, as Australia wants to convert 200 million acres or clean up the soil health or something. Do you know what the wording was on that?
I forget.
Yeah.
I read so much, I put so much on Kiss the Ground that, yeah, I saw that there. I was really happy, but they're really lead them in New Zealand. But then again, you can't leave anyone out, because if you didn't have everybody, like Ken was saying, doing their little part, you wouldn't get this energy moving forward right now.
It's true. Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, so there's a lot of hope and a lot of good news. There's coursework at Kiss the Ground. If you're interested, here's the website. I just put the link up here. I don't have, when I am on my presentation screen in share mode, I don't see access to the chat. So I'm wondering if somebody can
put it in the chat. And I'll also send out an email after this program in the next couple of days with a link to the recording and all the links and resources we mentioned.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I appreciate that. Thanks for doing that. Then I'm just ending with, we have the ability to regenerate the earth, make it all green and paradise again. And here's some references. In case anybody wants to screenshot this or whatever, or ask me, and then we can put it in the chat, or Jessica will be able to put it in the follow-up information.
Yeah,
so,
put it in the info.
Okay, yeah, there's some good stuff in here, like how do we scale this kind of agriculture to feed the world? And there's actually research and data collected that says we can do it. There's a lot of it. It's very hopeful. How can we improve farmer profits and stimulate the economy? There's all kinds of questions about that are answered in a lot of these articles here. And also, if anybody's interested in just getting active and involved, ecosystemsrestorationcamps.org is an interesting one to check out. There's a lot of land restoration going on with this group. You can travel all around the world to their different camps and help out with restoration of land. It's a really cool one. And then here's just some final references. This one has the mycorrhizal fungi, how it works in the soil with plants, in case you're interested in doing that with adding inoculant on your garden or your lawn or anything like that. So do we have any farmers with us today? I'm just curious. Nope.
Well,
Okay.
they already spoke. I know what she was wondering about. One's from Manitoba. We're the only 2 Canadians.
Yeah, no, he was on the panel. I was wondering if we had any other.
Oh, I see. I see,
Yeah.
Melinda. Yeah.
Yep. So, okay. Yeah. I'm going to take my screen off share now and see everybody. I couldn't really see everybody while I was doing that. But thank you so much for coming today, and had fun learning and talking with everybody. Does anybody have any more? Yeah, you're welcome. Does anybody have more questions or discussion, or should we
I
wrap it
wouldn't
up?
mind asking Michael about red wrigglers.
In buying them or using them?
In using them. I've got some available, and I just wonder if they're as effective as any others, or.
No, they are. They're very effective. They're very ferocious when they eat. They love pumpkin. So,
excellent, because I'm growing some giant pumpkins right now.
yeah, just don't put the seed in with it. I forgot to take some of the seed out when I put it in with my compost, and it's trying to germinate.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I do silly things at times.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining.
Good. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Glad you could all be here. And thank you to our other soil advocates, Toni and Michael and Cameron, for joining today and helping with the question Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you.
You know, the problem is that Bill Gates and what's his face, Jeff Bezos, are buying up farmland in the US.
Yeah.
So that would be, if somebody could get to them, I don't know if it's possible to talk some sense into them, but Bill Gates is a big GMO guy, you know, so he'll probably want to do everything. But it would be fabulous to have Bezos come on board. I don't know, just my thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And we were talking about that at some of our Kiss the Ground classes. How do we find a way to talk to Bill Gates? I think somebody actually put out a, what was it? One of those survey, like a Google document where you can send a message, like a petition kind of thing to him.
Oh.
They wrote something up. Yeah, I wish I could. Change.org. I think if you go to change.org, there's one to Bill Gates. Is that, Toni, does that ring a bell? No? Okay.
I don't think I saw that, but I might look for it.
Okay.
I would say Bill Gates is probably a lost cause, just because I know he's a big GMO fan. So I would go for Bezos if you got to focus your attention somewhere.
Bezos. Okay.
I mean, I just think, I don't know I know Gates is a GMO fan. I know that he started one of the seed, what do you call them? Where they store the seeds, and they're GMO seeds that he's.
Seed bank.
Seed bank.
Seed bank. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. I just focus on Bezos. He might be the same, but I don't know anything about him. So, and that, anyway, it's kind of scary that they're buying up farmland to me.
Yeah, it is kind of scary. Yeah, I agree.
I put a link in the chat a couple of times, but if anyone has the chance to fill out our short survey about, it's just letting us know what you thought of tonight's event, and if you have suggestions for future programs, that's in the chat for anyone who wants to take a second to fill that out after the event.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jessica, for organizing.
You're welcome. And I did record this, and I'll send it out in a follow-up email in the next couple of days, along with the references that you provided.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, everybody, have a good night. Take care.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Melinda.
Thank you. Bye-bye.